Okay, we got the switch mount in. That's the on-off switch, the reset switch. Now we want to talk a little bit about, okay, this wire, that's for the remote switch. This wire here goes to the power supply, 12-volt power supply. Now, see, I also have to have a input for the motor. So these holes here, this one and this one, and there's two more on the other side. What they do is they're for this guy here. That's the inside. That's the outside. Now this is I guess you could call it a adapter plate, but I needed more ports than what this one block had. There's not enough room in there to put more than two. So I had to adapt this plate, and this fits onto the back of here. Basically like that. So these two screws, and two screws on the other side of it holds this. So we have here this port. This for the motor, stepper motor. 4 wires going here, and that's the 4 wires that go on the top of that motor controller. It's ones that go here, 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 and here. This one is the positive 12 volt. This one is the negative 12 volt. And these 4 are for the stepper controller. So I have on the back of this thing I have a cutout where the wires come through. Now this over here is for air. This is one of those push connectors. And I put that in there because you got the motor controller with the heat sink, and there's really no way of cooling it. There's no air that goes through this thing. So I'm going to use one of these little valves, the same kind you use on a little spray mister, little controller valve. And these are push type connectors. And I'm going to put in, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 pounds of air, just to get a flow, through there. And it'll come out anywhere where there's a hole, but just to get a little air movement through there. Now this piece in the back, there's a step on here. And that's for I got a little O-ring that goes in there. So this piece goes on the back. Like I said, it gets bolted in those 4 places. Now this, I was talking before about the height of this diode, rectifier diode, or whatever this thing is. If you measure from here, the case, to the top of here, it comes out to about 1.3 inches. And if you measure the box, it comes out to 1.9 inches. So you got about 3/16 clearance between the top of here and the bottom of the box. Now I was saying before that, these mounts, you can't go too low or else you'll hit the push button switches, and you can't go too high or else this thing will hit the box. So the measurements I gave you before, that's got to be like a ballpark figure. You can go a little bit above that or below that, but not too much. So the other half of this box looks like this. Now, I put these standoffs on them. And the reason I did that is so that when this box is sitting, you put your hand under it and pick it up and hold the box, because you don't want it laying down flat, and you can't have it standing up because all the cables are going to be in the back. So I put these 4 screws in, 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom. Then they go into these Delrin pieces. They're just, like I said, standoffs. They're just a space between the ground and the underside of the box, so you can put your hand in there to lift it up. Now, when somebody drilled these holes, these 2 here, the spacing between these holes, you can probably see it here a little better. You see where that Allen head bolt almost goes into that other cross hole that's on there, and it actually does hit. The one bolt does go intersect that other hole. And I won't mention who did that, but they ended up ruining a nice little tap. So you want to watch that. These holes here could have been spaced down a little bit further. Would have avoided that little problem. Could have moved those down another 1/8 of an inch. But some things happen. No big deal. Now this aluminum piece on the front, that's when I got this box on the table, and I got the big heavy cable coming off the back of it, all those cables. I don't want this thing moving around. So what I did was I put this cutout in here so that I could put a bolt in the table and put a nut on it and bolt it down to the table so it doesn't move. Because when you're doing your calculations here and pushing the buttons, you don't want this thing sliding around on the table and falling off. So I put that hook on there so that I could put a stud through the table, just a standard half inch stud, put a nut on it and lock this thing down. Or I could put a little stud sticking off the front of the table and just hook this into it. And the weight of that, you know, you put a stud there, a little spacer, a little washer and a nut, so that the hook will hold it from left and right, and the nut and the washer will keep it from falling off. But that was just something I put in there because eventually, you know, I'd like to put this on the table, do my calculations, and then sometimes maybe hook this on the front of the table. That way it's out of the way. Or hook it on some kind of vertical thing so that it's out of the way and not always sitting on the table. Because when you use the remote button, you don't need this. You got the remote button, so you don't have to mess this up. And this little cutout here is for the wires to go through. And these spacers actually serve two purposes, because not only do they space the box up off the table, but you attach this one hook thing to the front, and then on the back this is a support for this guy here, because those two screws that mount in here isn't really enough to hold it. So when this is in place, that fits something like that. So these two, there's two holes in here, and that gets bolted together, and this one gets bolted onto this right here in these two spots, so that's together. Then you got 4 screws in the box that bolt that together. Those 4 screws come with the box. It's got like an O-ring thing on it, but we won't be using that because it won't need that. So anyway, that's what the bottom of it looks like. Got the air line, got the 4 wires that come in for the motor, got the remote and the power. So I'm not going to lift it up because I don't want it coming apart, but when I put the screws in it, you'll see what it looks like all together. So I think that about finishes the control box. And we'll have to now see that other nut I had to make. That worked out pretty good because I just put this little guy on here and tightened that little puppy right up and had no problems. But you can see there's like no room in there. These little notches, this little notch here helps the wires, little place for the wires to go. Alright, talk to you later.